The second book of Chronicles, like the first, details the exploits of the kings of Israel and Judah. The stories about the kings range from those who were wicked to those who were righteous and those who were somewhere in between. 2 Chronicles chapter 29 to 32 detail the stories of King Hezekiah. There are many lessons to learn from this good king. Hezekiah is remembered for the monumental feat of creating the underground tunnel which diverted the Gihon spring into the city of David. For those of you who have visited the City of David Archaeological Park in Jerusalem, you would have seen this tunnel or perhaps even walked in it. The lesson we learn from this tunnel is preparedness. Hezekiah was aware of the threat from the king of Assyria, also very wise to identify that any invading force would need fresh water to survive for months on end during the siege of Jerusalem. Where previously unused water was diverted outside the city walls, where it would benefit an invading force, Hezekiah commissioned the water from the Gihon spring to be kept within the fortified city walls. 2 Chronicles 32 verse 30 says it was Hezekiah who blocked the upper outlet of the Gihon spring and channeled the water down to the west side of the city of David, and he succeeded in everything he undertook. So here we see that King Hezekiah always thought about being prepared. He was aware of the invading army that was threatening to come to Jerusalem, and he wanted to make the necessary preparations so that the city and the people would be prepared for any eventualities. There is an overall consensus that King Hezekiah was a good and righteous king who sought to do what was right in the eyes of God. These righteous acts are recorded in 2 Chronicles. Hezekiah restored the service and worship in the temple, recognizing that the unfaithfulness of the people of Judah and Jerusalem to their God needed to be rectified. He instructed the priests of Levi to consecrate themselves so that sacrifices could be reinstated in the temple. He commanded them to sing psalms and praises of David and Asaph. Hezekiah leads the people to observe the festivals of the Lord, beginning with Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The result was that the people went out from celebrating these feasts and destroyed the idols and eliminated idolatry throughout their territories, returning both the land and the people to the Lord. The second book of Chronicles tells us that the joy and the power during this time of restoration was great. So following this period of restoration and returning to the Lord, the heavens were opened, and once again the people's prayers, the Levites' prayers, were received by the Lord in heaven. Now, after all these righteous deeds, we wouldn't expect to read the next verse, which follows in chapter 32. In chapter 32 we read, "After these deeds of faithfulness, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came and entered Judah. He encamped against the fortified cities, thinking to win them over to himself." There's a lesson here that even though we strive with all our hearts to do what is right in life, we may still have problems. King Hezekiah did many righteous deeds, and he was faithful to the Lord, and he turned his people back to right service of God himself. Yet he still has to face the tyrant king of Assyria. He wasn't able to escape his problems by the righteous deeds or righteous living or turning the people back to God. He still had to face up to certain problems that he would have to deal with in his life. So there's a lesson here for us that even though sometimes we may be doing everything right in our lives, problems may still arise. There may still be things that we need to face with the help of the Lord. And it's not necessarily that bad things happen because of our bad actions. Sometimes they do. Sometimes we do have to bear the consequences of sin and bad decisions in our lives. But there are other times, as we see here with King Hezekiah, where you have to face the problems that come in life even though you are living righteously and living right with the Lord. So as Hezekiah tries to encourage his people during this very difficult time, the king of Assyria is realizing that the siege and overthrowing of Jerusalem will prove more difficult. So he sends messengers to deliver a message to Hezekiah and the people of Judah. This message instills fear in the people, that all hope is lost and that their God and their king Hezekiah cannot protect them. King Sennacherib spoke even more blasphemous words against God and against his servant Hezekiah. This must have been devastating to the people and the king to hear these words decree destruction to the city and its inhabitants. But once again, here is a lesson to learn from how King Hezekiah responds. Let's turn to chapter 32, verse 20. Now verse 20 says, "Because this king Hezekiah and the prophet Isaiah, the son of Amos, prayed and cried out to heaven, the Lord sent an angel who cut down every mighty man of valor and every captain in the camp of the king of Assyria. So he returned shamefaced to his own land. And when he had gone into the temple of his God, some of his own offspring struck him down with the sword." Here again we see King Hezekiah's wonderful response. He prayed, he cried out to God, and the Lord responds by sending destruction into the camp of the enemy. The retelling of the events and actions of the kings were chronicled for each generation of royalty to learn from the generation before, and hopefully not to make the same mistakes. As kings would read through the chronicles, they would find out their predecessors' failings, and also the actions that brought forth life, and which choices resulted in death. There are numerous lessons to learn in these stories for living righteously, even for us today. I hope you take away these 3 lessons from King Hezekiah, that we can be prepared, that we might have problems in our lives even though we live righteously, and thirdly, that we can pray to the Lord and trust that He will intervene even in the most difficult situations and attack the enemy on our behalf.